Hello and welcome to the No Glitz, No Glamour daily video from Bankster DFS. My name is Doug Shane, and we are going to take a look right now at NFL Week 2 GPP leverage and pivot plays to help us crush tournaments this weekend. Just a friendly reminder, folks, that if you're interested in Bankster DFS, and you should be, we don't just cover NFL, we cover all the sports. All the major sports, all the niche sports, all the college sports. Just this weekend alone, we have 4 NFL articles, 3 slates of pools for college football. We have MMA, we have PGA Showdown all weekend long. We've got soccer from PGA, soccer from FSWA award winner 2019, Soccer Writer of the Year, Jeff Kaminsky. MMA, we've got everything this weekend. We've got plays for Prize Picks DFS with whom we have a partnership. You get a 100% first-time deposit bonus up to $100. There is a link in the description box for how you can do that. We cover sports betting. We have Bankster University, which is our training wing where we've taught you how to pick proper contests and have proper GPP lineup building skills and all sorts of wonderful things, all part of banksterdfs.com, where you get your daily player pools for all the major college and niche sports. Slack chat, where we have the shared knowledge, where Team Bankster comes together with the Bankster community. We talk about lineups, talk about plays. We just have a great time, build some friendships. It's wonderful. And of course, as I mentioned, you do get award-winning articles and analysis from FSWA award winners like myself, Doug Shane, and Jeff Kaminsky, and the host of Team Bankster members who I think are future FSWA award winners. If you want to join Team Bankster, just come on over to banksterdfs.com/subscribe. $3.99 a week is all it takes to become a member of our team. There are no hidden fees. There is no extras on there. Bankster University included, Slack chat included, all the sports included, under a cup of coffee at Starbucks every single week, $3.99 a week. If you want to lower that weekly cost, you can sign up for monthly or yearly options as well. And please remember, as long as you are with us and you do not cancel your membership, your price will never increase no matter how high we raise the prices for new members. Whatever you sign up for is what you stay at for the lifetime of your membership as long as you stay with us. Everything, all sports, all content, no hidden fees, banksterdfs.com. If you have any questions, hit me up on Twitter at Bankster17. And please don't forget on Twitter to join us every Sunday morning, myself and Michael Gudadero at 10:30 in the morning, both on Twitter and our YouTube page. We will be streaming live NFL Live Before Lock, where we will talk about your cash games, your GPPs, inactives, pivots, your lineups, whatever you want to talk about. We're going to be there for an hour and a half. This week, we will have a special guest host as Michael Gudadero is out of town. I will have Sean Goodwin, the Dirty Slot, will be joining me this week, 10:30 live on Twitter and YouTube. And while you're here, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon so you are aware when we post our videos. We do them daily. And we do have that live stream every week. And sometimes we'll have more than one video, particularly when we throw out a Bankster University training video. We'll double up on videos those days. Let's shoot for 20 likes on this video. We tried it yesterday, came close. Let's hit 20 likes today, and I will give you something special over the weekend. But right now, we have something special, and we're going to talk about GPP lineups this week. I've taken the liberty to preload a lineup in front of you, which I believe will be probably the chalk build this week. It's well within reason that the Dallas and Chargers game will be the chalkiest game we have maybe all year, definitely in this early part of the season. You've got the terrible defense of the Dallas Cowboys and their amazing offense going up against an amazing Chargers offense who went into Washington last week and looked great. No one expected Justin Herbert to come out and do follow up on his great rookie season in week 1 against this stout Washington defense, though after last night's game against the Giants, maybe Washington's not as stout as we thought, but Herbert looked great, throwing for over 300 yards, and he's got a number of pass catchers priced no higher than $7,000 to throw the ball to. It's just going to be a lot of fantasy goodness in this game. And whether the quarterback for your team, for the chalkier team, is going to be Dak Prescott or Justin Herbert, I do think you're going to see all 4 of the main pass catchers be very widely rostered this week. Keenan Allen, disrespectfully priced at only $7,000 for a guy who's guaranteed to see more than, guaranteed's a tough word, but he pretty much sees 10 or more targets every single game. Amari Cooper sees that every time Dak Prescott's under center. CeeDee Lamb had well more than 10 targets. I believe, what do you have, 15 targets in week 1 against the Buccaneers? 14, 15 targets? Let's pull that up. 15 targets. Dak kept looking for him. And then, of course, Mike Williams had more than 10 targets in week 1 12 targets, 82 yards, and a touchdown, and they're just going to be throwing the ball over the field. This could be a really high-scoring game, one of the highest totals, the highest total of the week, 54.5 points. You're going to see a lot of people in there, and I threw Elijah Mitchell in there because I do expect a lot of people to run Mitchell out there as one of the pieces that's going to make all of these players fit from the Cowboys and Chargers. Now, while I said they aren't cost prohibitive too much, they're still priced in the 6 to 7K range, and you get enough of those guys in your lineup, you need to find some value. Mitchell's starting running back for the 49ers, supposedly, and should see some volume. I do have some reservations about Mitchell, but I do think he is going to be the guy who gets you into, or that gets people to be able to spend up for this game. We're going to talk about, well, I don't love Mitchell as a tournament play. I think his roster percentage is going to be way too high. I'm going to have 0% Mitchell in tournaments this week. I'm probably not going to use him in cash actually now either, but I just think pivoting off of Mitchell, just like last weekend, we pivoted off MARQUEZ CALLAWAY in tournaments, and he bombed out, and Deontay Harris and Juwan Johnson had far better games. Actually, Adam Troutman had a better game if you take a look at it. So I do think that there's an avenue to pivot off of Elijah Mitchell. We'll talk about that as well later. When you build this lineup, you're going to find that if you even want to try to get a little different, it's going to be very hard to do that, because if you put in the quarterback from this game, whether it's Prescott or Herbert, you're going to get the 4 pass catchers. Well, you're going to have to spend down at a couple positions. Tight end's a really easy position to spend down at. You can go with Jordan Akins, the pass-catching tight end for the Houston Texans, especially with Pharaoh Brown, who had a big week last week, a little nicked up. Cleveland is terrible against tight ends. Jordan Akins is a guy you can use at tight end for 3K. You can also look at Adam Troutman, who people want to talk about Juwan Johnson's 2 touchdowns, but Adam Troutman actually had 6 targets, 30% target share for the team. It's one of the highest target shares in all of the NFL. Juwan Johnson was only in for 12 snaps. He happened to score 2 touchdowns, but Troutman is the guy that you're really going to take a look at. So we've got Troutman in there as potential. So people are going to want to throw him in there, him or Akins or another cheaper tight end. You're going to want to spend down a little bit on defense. I think that, in this Miami, Indy, Philly range could be pretty interesting. We'll just throw Indy in there, and that leaves you around a little over $6,000. And so what are people going to do with that? They're going to look to Carson, Montgomery, Najee Harris. We'll throw Najee Harris in there. You're going to see a lot of lineups that look like this. It's a good lineup. I think it'll be a fairly high scoring lineup, but it will be incredibly chalky, and you're going to find the roster percentage is going to be well past that 135% cumulative percentage that we're looking for. I'm not saying we shouldn't play this Dallas game. As a matter of fact, I think this Dallas game is one we absolutely do need to target. And there are a couple ways that we can target this game while potentially lowering our cumulative roster percentage and allowing us to jump a GPP field if things go our way. First thing we're going to do is pull Elijah Mitchell. We're going to pull Najee Harris. We're going to pull Troutman. We're going to pull the Colts for right now. We're going back to that original stack. What I'm then going to do, I think CeeDee Lamb is going to carry a ton of roster percentage, so I'm going to get rid of him, and I'm going to get rid of Mike Williams for right now. I'm not saying we have to get rid of Williams, but I do like the upside from Allen and Cooper. I do think Allen's going to carry a ton of roster percentage, but we can have some chalk in our lineup, and I just like the consistency that Allen brings. Williams may have a little more upside, but Allen's going to be the guy who's going to get us, that 20-point floor with some upside as well if he scores a touchdown. Cooper, his volume is just out of control with Prescott at quarterback, and if we're going to use Prescott, then Cooper's a guy that we should have in there. What I'm going to do now to continue to stack this game, I'm still going to double stack this game in this scenario here, but instead of using the second pass catcher for the Chargers, I'm actually going to go in and use Austin Eckler instead of Mike Williams. He's a little more expensive, which is going to force us to spend down somewhere else, especially if I'm not going to use Elijah Mitchell. So by pulling Elijah Mitchell from my lineup at $5,000, I have to find somewhere else to punt. And by going up to Eckler from Mike Williams, he's $900 more expensive. I need to find an actual cheaper player than Mitchell as my punt option. Well, there is one really good punt option, and it's right within this Dallas game. I do think he's going to carry quite a bit of roster percentage, but it's going to be Cedric Wilson. Cedric Wilson is filling in for an injured Michael Gallup. Wilson was the guy who got all the snaps when Gallup got hurt at the end of last week's game. And even if he only sees 15% of the targets for the Cowboys, Dak Prescott's throwing 50 times a game. He's been throwing 50 times a game since the beginning of last year. 15% of 50 is still 7.5 targets. 7.5 targets for 3K is pretty ridiculous. What we can do now is I'm going to use my flex position to go take a guy. And so not only am I going to talk about the stacks here, but I'm going to talk about some pivots we can use and some lower rostered players that we can use to help fill in our lineups as one-offs or mini stacks to help us differentiate our lineups a little bit. And one guy that I'm looking at, we're going to go back to that New Orleans game, is I'm going to go right back to MARQUEZ CALLAWAY. MARQUEZ CALLAWAY last week did not have a good game. MARQUEZ CALLAWAY came in and he only had 2 targets. And so people are like, wow, CALLAWAY had a pretty terrible game. Deontay Harris had more points and Juwan Johnson had more points and Adam Troutman had more targets. But MARQUEZ CALLAWAY had more snaps. He was in the game for more snaps than any of the New Orleans receivers. And he was double the next highest receiver on New Orleans. He had double the amount of snaps as Deontay Harris. MARQUEZ CALLAWAY is the clear wide receiver 1. So what happened last week? Well, Jair Alexander happened. He went up against Alexander. And the Green Bay cornerback, he's a stud cornerback, shut CALLAWAY down. While I think the Panthers are an improved defense, and I love what they did with Jeremy Chin last year and J.C. Horn this year, I do think that they're still not all the way there yet. And despite the fact that they had a pretty good game against the Jets, they still gave up a ton of yards to Corey Davis. They gave up a ton of yards to the tight end position, which is why I kind of like Troutman this week. And no one's going to be on CALLAWAY. CALLAWAY's price went up $800. And he did nothing. He burned a lot of people last week. Awesome. Keep the roster percentage low. Let me throw him into my lineup. I'm still going to punt defense because I always punt defense. I don't believe in necessarily spending up. I'm in that Eagles range. And that's going to give me quite a lot of extra money for my lineup, $6,200. I can go run to I think it's going to be a fairly chalky Nick Chubb, but he's in an amazing matchup this week. And that leaves me $4,600 left for my tight end position. I could go to Dallas Goedert. I can go to Jonnu Smith, who has a great matchup against the Jets, who are terrible against the tight end. I don't care if that's his third. Carolina just doesn't. This just based on this year, and Carolina doesn't use their tight ends. I like Noah Fant this week. I can throw Noah Fant in there, and that actually gives me an extra $400 to play around with if I wanted to improve my defense. So maybe we move off the Eagles and we go to maybe the Bears or the Panthers, even though we have CALLAWAY. I do think the Panthers, they do get in the backfield quite a bit. I do think that front seven's improving. But the Dolphins, maybe against the Bills, there's other things we can do. Or you just leave the $400 on the table. We don't want to leave a ton of money on the table in tournaments, but $400 we can leave on the table without too big of an issue. One other thing I want to take a look at here too is, instead of Chubb, if we want to really differentiate, since Chubb I think will be a little chalky, and it's okay to have some chalk here though, because I think we're differentiating our lineup with the Dallas stack. But what we can do is we can put in Derrick Henry and just lower our defense a little bit from the $2,400 Eagles down to whatever we have at $2,322. Again, I don't worry too much about defense. I just want guys who might get pressure. Jets will probably get some pressure on Mac Jones, rookie quarterback. Their front seven's not terrible, and Jets aren't great, but they're playable. Derrick Henry is going to carry no roster percentage. He was not great last week. Tennessee's expected to throw against Seattle, but we know Derrick Henry can break a slate. So if you want to get a little crazy, you put in Henry. I personally prefer Chubb in this spot, but Henry will carry a third of the roster percentage of Chubb, and maybe less. So that's one way we can approach this game, is by using Henry, or by using Eckler and Wilson instead of 2 other pass catchers within this game. We can also differentiate a little bit by not using Wilson, who I think will carry a fairly high roster percentage. And this is if we're stacking I prefer this way if we're stacking the Charger side with Herbert as our quarterback. You go with Zeke Elliott. Zeke Elliott's super cheap. He's been using the passing game before. He faced the #1 rush defense in the NFL last week in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. No one's going to roster him for some reason. $6,200 is a crazy low price for him, and the Chargers are a lot easier to run on than the Buccaneers, and people are going to overreact. What we can then do is we could either go back to Mike Williams if we wanted to, or we can take a look at Jared Cook as our secondary player for the Chargers. Cook had himself a great week last week, 8 targets, and he's going up against a Dallas team that just got crushed by Gronk. I think that tight end position is great and to use against the Cowboys. They don't defend it well, and Cook is a guy who we know can get down the field. He's hyper athletic. He's a guy that's going to make a lot of sense in this lineup. And again, we can run back a lot of the similar players that we used in the last lineup. Again, I want to take a look at where's Nick Chubb and a cheap defense. And in this case, I don't think I'm going to necessarily need to have to use MARQUEZ CALLAWAY unless I really want to. So I could go in there and use CALLAWAY. And that'll leave me whatever I've got. what do we got here? 5,200 if I use, or 5,000. I could go back to Mitchell. And so this is actually an interesting number, $5,000, because if $5,000 was sitting there, a lot of people are going to go to Mitchell. But you don't have to. Jamar Chase makes a lot of sense in this spot against the Chicago Bears defense that gave up a couple of long touchdowns to Van Jefferson and Cooper Kupp. Chase clearly looked fine this past week. You could go to Christian Kirk, though I think I'd prefer to use Rondale Moore because, fun fact, Rondale Moore had the same number of targets as Christian Kirk in half the snaps. Kirk had a great week, but I don't think it's a lockdown that Christian Kirk is the guy. I'd probably throw Jamar Chase in here. I think he will carry some roster percentage, but maybe not so much against the Bears because people think the Bears defense is still good, but they can be beaten deep. One other way that I'm going to look to differentiate using this Cowboys game is a lot of people are going to play this game and they're going to stack a quarterback with 2 pass catchers on both sides, or a quarterback with 2 pass catchers and run it back with only 1 pass catcher. One way to differentiate yourself is to overstack this game. Run the quarterback, in this case I'll run Prescott here, and run 5 pass catchers for the other side. Or not for the other side, in this game. So I'm going to run Prescott. I can differentiate a little bit with Eckler. I've got Allen, Cooper, Cook. Maybe I put Wilson in there. And I could run Cook or I could run Mike Williams depending upon how I feel about being able to differentiate the rest of my lineup, how I can find some value. I think there's a ton of value to play right here. So if I wanted to go with Mike Williams here at 6,400, sorry guys, computer runs a little slow, but One Take Charlie does this in one take. 6,100, not 6,400, even cheaper. Mike Williams, by the way, he's 5,600, 5,800 on FanDuel, super cheap. Mike Williams is a great one-off on FanDuel. He'll be very popular, but it's a good play. So we can run this lineup here. Again, put a cheap defense. I just keep going back to the Eagles. I don't hate the Eagles. Can I run Chubb out there at 78? I probably can't. So maybe we look and use someone else. Maybe we use a Najee Harris. We can get a little, because we've run Eckler, Allen, Cooper, Wilson, Williams. We run 5 players. We can afford to spend, have a chalkier player like a Najee Harris here in our running back position. Leaves you $4,200 left at tight end, which is perfect. That's Noah Fant. Love Noah Fant this week against Jacksonville. They're terrible. This is a lineup. This is where we can differentiate this lineup and make it look, still play the Cowboys game, but not have a lineup that's going to be too similar to everyone else. Those are 3 different ways. I've shown 3 different ways that we can still play the chalk lineup, on the slate, and differentiate it enough so we can move up the field if our plays hit. Another way, of course, that we can do that is to pivot off this game. And Michael Gudadero, in his Leverage and Pivots article that he wrote, talked about the 2 highest team totals on the slate. While the Dallas Cowboys and LA Chargers have the highest game total, the 2 teams with the biggest individual team total on the slate are the Cleveland Browns and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And they work perfectly in conjunction for a lineup if you want to stack those 2 teams, the teams with the highest team totals, right? You would think you'd want to play the teams with the highest team totals. While they don't correlate to each other, they do marry pretty well because we're going to want to focus on the Cleveland running game against a historically bad Texans rush defense and the Tampa Bay passing game against a terrible Atlanta secondary. So I'm going to get a little bit crazy, just as Gouda suggests in his article. He says, hey, let's get a little crazy and stack Chubb and Hunt. You run Brady out there you use Godwin and Antonio Brown. Brady has never favored Mike Evans, and once Antonio Brown came onto the team, he favored Evans even less. He loves Antonio Brown, and Chris Godwin actually had more targets than Brown and Evans combined last week, and he's in a great spot against Atlanta, who cannot defend the slot at all. So if we run this out here, we've got Brady, we've got Godwin and Brown, Chubb and Hunt for the Browns, and I'm going to stack them with that Browns defense. 13-point favorites, high team total. The Texans have the lowest team total on the slate at only like 18 points. This is a great spot to run this game, to run both these stacks, the 2 potential high scoring teams, highest team totals, in one stack. Now we can still run back this Tampa Bay stack with Calvin Ridley. We can actually make this work. You run Ridley in there at 7,500, and that leaves us enough room to put Cedric Wilson in our lineup as a flex. Whoops. There you go, Cedric Wilson. Add a flex. That leaves us $2,800 for a tight end. And we can find a value tight end in there. Now, if you don't want to run the Browns defense in there, you want to get really crazy, you go in there, and we can run Jared Cook as our tight end. And that leaves us $2,400 to run that Eagles defense, which I kind of like this week. We don't necessarily get the full correlation with Chubb Hunt and the Browns defense, but we do get ourselves that correlation between Cook and Cedric Wilson. We do get the Tampa Bay stacked with the run back of Calvin Ridley, and you do get to attack that Cleveland run game. And now you're looking at the teams with the 2 highest expected team totals on the slate in one lineup with a run back, and you're getting exposure to the game with the highest total points on the slate. I'm not 100% sure we can run a lineup that really speaks GPP better than that, right? Like, that's a lineup that makes a ton of sense to me. Right? You got the 2 high-scoring teams, high-scoring game on the slate. I love it. There's a lot of other pivots that we talk about in our article this week, and of course we'll be talking about pivots in our Bankster DFS Slack chat for members only. And Gouda's got his pivots and leverage article. I have a section about leverage and pivots in my cash game article. I do have a section for GPPs as well. And folks, you can get all of that for $3.99 per week when you're a member of banksterdfs.com. When you go to banksterdfs.com/subscribe, $3.99 per week gets you access to everything that we do. If you have any questions, please contact me at Bankster17. We look forward to seeing you Sunday morning live on Twitter and our YouTube page for NFL Live Before Lock. Once again, my name has been and continues to be Doug Shane. This is the Bankster DFS No Glitz, No Glamour daily video. Thank you for taking some time out of your weekend to spend it with me and hear what we have to say. And I look forward to seeing you at banksterdfs.com. Have a great weekend.